They did not mean to summon humanity. They were praying for angels. They opened a door into the stars, and instead, they brought war. Far beyond Earth, inside a living station carved from silver crystal, the High Council of the Lemurians trembled in silence. Their civilization had known peace for over 10,000 years. They had erased hunger. They had erased war. They had even erased the memory of violence from their schools and songs. But they could not erase the void. The void fleet moved like a disease between systems. Black biomechanical ships swallowed planets whole. Oceans boiled. Atmospheres were stripped away. Entire civilizations vanished without even sending a final message. The Lemurians were thinkers, builders, dreamers. They were not fighters. Supreme Scholar Vila hovered before the Grand Summoning Prism, his glowing form flickering with fear. Ancient texts spoke of cosmic defenders, powerful beings from distant stars who answered desperate calls. Pure warriors. Guardians of life. Activate the ritual, Vila whispered. Energy gathered. Light bent. Space twisted. A portal tore open. Across the galaxy, on a dusty training ground in Nevada, Captain Elias Ward was running a late-night drill with his unit, Ghost Team 7. They were specialists in unconventional warfare. They trained for the worst-case scenario. Terror attacks. Rogue states. Biological disasters. They were not training for aliens. The desert sky cracked open like glass. Before anyone could react, blinding light swallowed the team whole. When the brightness faded, sand was gone. The desert was gone. They stood inside a massive crystal chamber under a foreign sky. Sergeant Hannah Volkov was the first to move. Perimeter, she barked. Weapons raised instantly. 5 soldiers formed a perfect defensive circle in less than 3 seconds. Across from them floated tall, glowing beings with translucent bodies and wide silver eyes. Everyone stared. Vila felt something terrifying. The minds of these creatures were not calm. They were not soft. Their thoughts were sharp. Focused. Hardened by struggle. They carried pain. They carried loss. And they carried the willingness to kill. We summoned protectors, Vila said carefully through a translation field. Are you the champions of light? Captain Ward slowly lowered his rifle, but not completely. We're soldiers, he replied. You pulled us out of Earth. Start explaining. Before anyone could answer, alarms screamed through the station. Red energy pulsed across the walls. The Void Fleet had arrived. Through the transparent outer shell of the station, black ships appeared like insects crawling over glass. The Lemurians froze. Ward did not. How long until impact? He demanded. They cannot be stopped, Vila said. Our energy weapons fail against their adaptive armor. We cannot fight them. Ward glanced at his team. Volkov cracked her neck. Adaptive armor? Good. I hate predictable targets. The first boarding pod smashed into the station with violent force. Metal screamed. Air rushed. Screams echoed down the corridor. The Lemurians panicked. Ghost Team 7 advanced. The first void creature burst through smoke, 8 feet tall, plated in shifting black armor, claws dripping acid. Private Luis Ortega fired without hesitation. 3 controlled shots. The bullets punched through the creature's skull. It collapsed. The corridor went silent. Vila stared in disbelief. Our beams could not penetrate them. Ward reloaded calmly. That's because you're fighting them wrong. More creatures charged. Volkov rolled a fragmentation grenade down the hallway. The explosion shook the entire chamber. When the smoke cleared, pieces of void monsters covered the walls. The Lemurians watched something they had not seen in thousands of years. Predators meeting predators. And for the first time, the void creatures hesitated. Ward's team moved like one organism. Cover fire. Tactical retreats. Flanking positions. No wasted movement. They were not stronger than the swarm. They were smarter. Captain, said tech specialist Amir Rahman, scanning a fallen creature with a portable analyzer. Their armor adapts to energy signatures. but it's slow against kinetic impact, and explosives overload their regeneration. Ward nodded. So we keep it simple. Behind them, Vila felt something new. Hope. Not gentle hope. Not peaceful hope. But sharp, dangerous hope. Another wave came, larger this time. The humans did not run. They advanced. Ortega climbed debris for high ground. Volkov laid suppressing fire. Rahman hacked into station systems mid-battle, rerouting power to seal corridors and trap enemies in crossfire zones. They were not just fighting. They were turning the station itself into a weapon. Within 20 minutes, the corridor was silent again. Black bodies littered the floor. Ghost Team 7 stood breathing hard but unbroken. The Lumerians could not understand what they were seeing. These humans were not beings of light. They were scarred, aggressive, loud. But they were protecting strangers without hesitation. You fight like the void, Vila said softly. Ward wiped alien blood from his visor. No, he replied. We fight because the void exists. More alarms blared. This was only the first breach. Outside, the massive Void flagship began charging a planet killer beam aimed directly at the station core. Vila trembled. That weapon will tear us apart. Ward looked through the crystal wall at the enormous ship. Then he smiled slightly. Good, he said. Now we know where to hit. And as the Void fleet prepared to erase another civilization from existence, humanity prepared to do what it had always done best. Survive, adapt, and turn fear into fire. The Void fleet believed the station was already dead. That was their first mistake. Inside Harmony Spire, smoke still drifted through shattered corridors. Alien civilians were being evacuated deeper into protected chambers. Emergency lights flickered red across crystal walls that had never known war. And in the middle of it all, 5 humans stood around a holographic projection of the enemy flagship. Captain Elias Ward studied the rotating image carefully. The massive ship pulsed like a living heart. Veins of black energy ran across its surface. Smaller ships orbited it like parasites. They think in swarms, Rahman said quietly, scanning intercepted signals. No individuality. Everything runs through the flagship. It's a hive control structure. Ward nodded. So we cut off the head. Vila floated nearby, still shaken but watching closely. You cannot reach it. Our fastest ships cannot break through their defense ring. Volkov gave a small grin. Good thing we're not your fastest ships. Ward turned to Vila. You said your weapons are energy-based. Clean. Precise. Predictable. Yes. That's why you're losing. Vila did not argue. Humans were not clean. Humans were not predictable. Rahman began modifying a captured Lumerian shuttle while speaking rapidly. Their shields absorb directed energy, but they don't fully stop mass at high velocity. That means physical impact still transfers force. Vila blinked. You intend to ram them? Ward's eyes hardened. Not ram. Inject. Within minutes, Ghost Team 7 had packed every remaining explosive they carried into the shuttle's cargo hold. They rewired alien propulsion systems. They stripped safety regulators. They turned a transport vessel into a kinetic spear. You cannot survive such a mission, Vila whispered. Ward checked his rifle one last time. We're not planning to. Volkov looked at him sideways. Sir. He gave a thin smile. Relax. That's just phase 1. The shuttle launched from a damaged docking bay under heavy fire. Void fighters swarmed immediately. Inside the cockpit, Rahman piloted with terrifying precision. He flew straight toward the enemy formation instead of away from it. Now they think we're desperate, Ortega muttered. That's because we are, Volkov replied. The Void ships fired streams of dark plasma. The shuttle shook violently as armor peeled away. 30 seconds. Rahman shouted. Ward activated the shuttle's broadcast array. On every frequency the Void fleet used, a simple human message transmitted in repeating pulse. You picked the wrong planet. The shuttle engines overloaded. At the last second, Raman triggered autopilot and ejected the team in armored drop capsules. The shuttle smashed into the shield perimeter of the flagship. The explosion did not destroy the giant ship. But it did something more important. It destabilized the Hive link. Across the battlefield, Void fighters suddenly lost coordination. Ships drifted. Some collided. For the first time, the swarm moved like confused animals instead of a single mind. Inside Harmony Spire, Lumerian commanders gasped. "It is disorganized," one cried. Ward's voice came through emergency comms as his team's drop pods streaked toward the flagship like falling meteors. "That's your window. Fire everything." Energy cannons from the station unleashed continuous beams into the now chaotic swarm. Without synchronized shield adjustments, the Void ships began to fall. Explosions bloomed across space like dark flowers. Meanwhile, Ghost Team 7 crashed onto the surface of the flagship. They landed hard but alive. The surface felt organic beneath their boots. It pulsed slowly, like breathing flesh. "Entry point here," Volkov said, planting shape charges. The explosion tore open a wound in the ship. They went inside. The interior was alive. Walls twitched. The floor reacted to their footsteps. Distant screeches echoed through corridors that reshaped themselves. Ortega fired a burst into a ceiling node that was forming tendrils. "Place is trying to digest us," he said. Ward moved forward without hesitation. "Then we give it something it can't stomach." Wave after wave of Void defenders attacked. But without full Hive synchronization, their reactions were slower. Human adaptability became deadly. They set traps in narrow corridors. They used fallen enemies as barriers. They redirected organic fluids into explosive reactions. Raman hacked into bioneural junctions, feeding false signals deeper into the ship. Instead of fighting the flagship head-on, they infected it with chaos. At the core chamber, they finally saw it. A massive pulsating brain structure suspended in black liquid, the central Hive intelligence. It radiated psychic pressure even through their helmets. Ward felt the weight of countless consumed worlds in that room. Volkov stared at it. "That thing's never known fear," she said. Ward armed the last device, a compact antimatter charge originally meant for bunker demolition. "Then let's introduce it." The Hive began screaming through every frequency. Outside, Void ships started pulling away from the station. Too late. Ghost Team 7 ran. The antimatter device detonated inside the core. The explosion did not simply tear metal. It erased matter. The flagship folded inward, collapsing like a dying star. The shockwave rippled across space. Every connected Void vessel spasmed. Without the central mind, they became wild, independent fragments. Some fled into deep space. Some turned on each other. Most were destroyed by the now coordinated Lumerian counterattack. From Harmony Spire, Vila watched the impossible happen. The Void fleet retreated. For the first time in their history, the Void lost. Hours later, a damaged escape pod drifted back toward the station. Inside were 5 exhausted humans. Alive. The docking bay doors opened slowly. Lumerian civilians gathered silently as the humans stepped out. No glowing halos. No divine light. Just bruised soldiers covered in ash and alien blood. Vila approached them carefully. "You have done what no ancient prophecy promised," he said softly. Ward removed his helmet. "We're not prophecy," he replied. "We're practice." The Lumerians had called for saviors. What they received was something far more dangerous. A species that learned from war. A species that refused extinction. A species that turned weakness into strategy. But deep in the darkness of space, fragments of the Void fleet still drifted. And somewhere beyond known stars, something older than the swarm began to watch Earth. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy. And the galaxy was listening. The galaxy had never feared anything, until it learned humanity could travel. Weeks after the destruction of the Void flagship, Harmony Spire was rebuilding. The Lumerians worked with new urgency, new purpose, new understanding. They were no longer alone. Captain Elias Ward stood on a balcony overlooking the stars beside Supreme Scholar Vila. Repairs shimmered across the station like glowing veins. "You changed us," Vila said quietly. Ward shook his head. "No. You were always capable. You just forgot something." "What did we forget?" Ward looked out into the black. "How to fight for what you love." Across the galaxy, fragments of the Void Swarm still drifted. Without a central hive mind, they were unpredictable but dangerous. Small systems were still being attacked. This time, however, they did not face energy beams alone. Human engineers had arrived. Earth had listened to the report. And Earth had responded. The first joint fleet launched only 30 days after contact. Human ships were not elegant like Lumerian vessels. They were thicker, armored, built like machines that expected to be hit. Missile racks replaced decorative crystal spires. Kinetic cannons lined hulls. Railguns hummed with raw mechanical power. When the combined fleet dropped out of warp near a void-infested system, the remaining swarm reacted violently. But they were no longer facing prey. They were facing hunters who had studied them. Admiral Naomi Kessler commanded from the human flagship Resolute. "Void vessels breaking formation," her tactical officer reported. "Let them," Kessler replied calmly. "Fragmentation makes them weaker." The Lumerians watched in awe as human ships did something unfamiliar. They advanced aggressively. Not recklessly. Not blindly. But confidently. Missiles streaked forward in controlled salvos, forcing void ships to maneuver. Railgun rounds punched through organic hulls before adaptive armor could compensate. Human pilots baited the swarm into traps, feigned retreats, crossfire zones, synchronized detonations. It was not chaos. It was strategy built from centuries of human conflict. A young Lumerian commander whispered, "They fight as if they expect resistance." Vila answered softly, "They do." The Void adapted. They began targeting human ships specifically. Swarm clusters focused fire on the Resolute. Hull alarms blared. Crew members braced. Admiral Kessler did not flinch. "Rotate armor segments. Redirect power to forward batteries. Keep firing." The Resolute absorbed punishment that would have shattered a Lumerian cruiser. Human ships were designed to survive impact. Designed by a species that had once thrown rocks at predators larger than themselves. Inside the battle zone, a void dread organism emerged, larger than anything previously encountered. It pulsed with unstable energy. "Unknown configuration," reported the tactical AI. Rahman, now working with fleet intelligence remotely, analyzed live data from Earth. "It's evolving independently," he said over secure channel. "Without a hive, it's experimenting." The dread organism fired a beam that tore through 2 Lumerian ships. Fear rippled through allied ranks. Kessler narrowed her eyes. "Good," she said. "Now it's thinking alone." Human destroyers shifted formation instantly. Instead of attacking the dread organism directly, they targeted its support vessels first. Cut mobility. Cut reinforcement. Cut escape routes. The creature roared across space, unleashing chaotic blasts. Human ships took damage. Some fell. But they did not scatter. They tightened formation. Like wolves circling a wounded giant. "Fire all forward mass drivers," Kessler commanded. Dozens of railguns fired simultaneously. Not at the center. At structural joints. Weak points predicted through rapid battlefield modeling. The dread organism twisted violently as kinetic rounds shattered stabilizing limbs. Missiles followed. Then boarding pods. Yes, boarding. Human marines breached the surface mid-battle. Inside, they planted synchronized antimatter charges across neural nodes. The final explosion ripped the creature apart from within. Silence followed. The remaining void fragments scattered into deep, cold space. The battle was over. For now. Across the fleet, Cheers echoed. But on Earth, scientists were already analyzing data. Because humans did not celebrate victory without preparing for the next threat. Back on Harmony Spire, Vila addressed a galaxy-wide transmission. For ages, we believed civilization meant removing violence from ourselves. We believed progress meant becoming gentle. He paused. But today we have learned something deeper. Strength is not evil. Strength guided by compassion is protection. Beside him stood Captain Ward and Admiral Kessler. Not glowing. Not divine. Human. Scarred. Imperfect. Determined. A young Lemurian child approached Ward later, looking up with wide silver eyes. "Are humans monsters?" the child asked softly. Ward knelt. "Sometimes," he said honestly. The child's glow dimmed slightly. "But only to things that try to hurt others," Ward continued. "And we choose who we become every day." Far beyond the known galaxy, something ancient observed. Not void. Not Lemurian. Something older. It had watched civilizations rise and fade. Most species chose comfort over conflict. Most avoided the cost of defense. But this new species, this earthborn anomaly, had taken war and turned it into discipline. Taken fear and turned it into strategy. Taken pain and turned it into unity. Humanity did not wait to be saved. Humanity built itself into something worth fearing. And worth standing beside. The stars no longer saw Earth as a primitive world. They saw it as a turning point. Because when the galaxy begged for saviors, it did not receive angels. It received a species that refused extinction. A species that adapted faster than destruction. A species that looked into the dark and said, "If you threaten what we love, we will come." And somewhere, drifting in the cold emptiness, the last fragments of the void learned a final lesson. The galaxy had summoned warriors. But it had awakened something far greater. Humanity.